Visionaries who shaped peace. To speak of visionaries is inevitably to speak of tragedy. Their visions extend beyond their time, but their bodies are bound to it, and too often cut down before they might finish what they began. Yet it is in this incompleteness that their stories grip us, for we see in them both the fragility of human endeavor and the extraordinary strength of ideas that survive beyond flesh. Jesus of Nazareth. 2,000 years ago, under the shadow of the Roman Empire, a man from Galilee spoke in parables to peasants, fishermen, and outcasts. His tools were not swords nor treasures, but stories about seeds, lamps, and lost sheep. He preached love in a world organized by domination, forgiveness in an empire addicted to crucifixion. The socio-economic world he moved within was one of stark inequality. A wealthy elite tied to Rome, and a population struggling with subsistence farming and crushing taxes. Yet his voice, speaking of a kingdom not of power but of peace, was enough to threaten both temple and empire. His execution at barely 30 was meant to extinguish him, but instead ignited a fire that reshaped civilization. His tragedy is complete, a death by torture, yet his influence radiates through millennia, shaping moral imagination itself. Mahatma Gandhi. Salt and cloth became his weapons. In a land fractured by poverty and caste, he spun thread as if weaving justice itself, and walked miles to the sea to gather a handful of salt that became a symbol of defiance against an empire built on taxes. His vision was nonviolence, yet he was surrounded by violence, colonial exploitation, communal riots, hunger. His life proved that resistance could be moral theater, a performance of justice on the stage of empire. His assassination in 1948 by a countryman revealed the deep paradox. Even prophets of peace can be slain by the intolerance of their own people. Martin Luther King Jr. In the midst of America's long twilight struggle against racial injustice, King rose with words that sounded like thunder but carried the gentleness of rain. He spoke of dreams not yet realized, of children holding hands across color lines, of justice rolling down like waters. The America he faced was built on segregation, redlining, and the economic disenfranchisement of millions of black citizens. Yet his marches and sermons pierced through, reshaping laws and conscience alike. He was just 39 when assassins silenced him, but his dream still echoes, unfinished yet unforgotten. Malcolm X. If King was the dreamer, Malcolm was the firebrand, though that is only half the truth. Born into poverty and crime, he forged himself in prison into a man of ideas and fierce rhetoric. His early calls for black separatism made him a symbol of defiance. But in the final years of his life, after a pilgrimage to Mecca, his vision widened. He began to speak not just of race but of humanity, not only of division but of dignity. That transformation from the clenched fist to the open hand was cut short by his assassination at 39. In Malcolm, we glimpse both the rage of the oppressed and the promise of their reconciliation. Yitzhak Rabin. In the deserts of the Middle East, peace seemed forever out of reach. Yet Rabin, a soldier-turned-statesman, dared to extend his hand to old enemies. In the Oslo Accords, he shook hands with Yasser Arafat, a moment that captured the fragile possibility of reconciliation. But peace is always most dangerous to those who thrive on conflict. In 1995, Rabin was murdered by an extremist from his own side, his death stalling the hope of peace for generations. His story illustrates the cruel irony that those who give peace its best chance are often destroyed by those who fear its arrival. John Lennon. His weapon was not politics, nor protest marches, but music. John Lennon's voice rang out in songs that invited people to imagine a world without borders, greed, or war. In the turbulence of the Cold War in Vietnam, his message was as radical as any manifesto. Unlike prophets in pulpits, Lennon's gospel was sung across radios and stadiums, turning pop culture into a pulpit. His assassination outside his New York home in 1980 was both shocking and symbolic, a voice of peace silenced by senseless violence. Yet his lyrics still live, half prayer, half anthem, echoing in every generation that dares to hope. Joan of Arc. At just 19, a peasant girl from France carried visions that kings could not ignore. She led armies under divine conviction, not because she sought war, but because she believed France's unity could end it. In a feudal society of poverty and brutality, her faith and courage unsettled rulers more than swords did. Captured and executed by burning, her death was a spectacle of cruelty. Yet Joan's legacy endured, transforming her from heretic to saint, from girl to symbol. She remains a reminder that even in the harshest of times, faith and courage can alter the course of nations. Each of these figures carried visions beyond their years and resources. Some wielded parables, some treaties, others songs or dreams. Their lives ended violently, yet the echoes of their voices shaped the very fabric of today's moral imagination. They remind us that peace, though fragile, is not weak. It is often feared most by those who cling to power. Their tragedies are immense, but their visions live on, unfinished yet unstoppable. Not all visionaries are remembered with statues or holidays. Some walked among us without fanfare, tending to their gardens, sometimes literally, while transforming their societies. Their stories do not carry the thunder of assassination, but the slow persistence of rain nourishing the soil. These are the voices who found ways to create peace in their regions, often with limited resources, immense constraints, and little international recognition. In 1948, while much of the world reeled from the aftermath of the Second World War, José Figueres Ferrer led Costa Rica down an unusual path. In a region long scarred by military juntas, coups, and dictatorships, Figueres did something almost unthinkable. He abolished the national military. His belief was radical for its time, that true security did not come from guns and tanks, but from educated children and healthy citizens. He redirected resources that might have gone to barracks and weaponry into schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. The socio-economic backdrop of Costa Rica in the mid-20th century was one of rural poverty, inequality, and vulnerability to external pressures. Yet, through Figueres's decision, the nation carved a different future. Today, Costa Rica is one of the most stable and peaceful nations in Latin America, with higher literacy rates and life expectancy than many of its neighbors. His story remains local in scope, but it is a testament to the power of visionary leadership in small nations. Wangari Maathai's hands were not stained with ink from political decrees, nor burdened with treaties, but with soil. In Kenya, where deforestation ravaged ecosystems and women bore the brunt of ecological collapse, Maathai founded the Green Belt movement. Her vision was deceptively simple: empower communities, especially women, to plant trees. But each sapling was more than a plant. It was a declaration of independence from scarcity, a shield against erosion, a symbol of dignity. Kenya's economy of scarcity, where soil erosion depleted harvests, where women struggled for firewood and water, gave Maathai's movement profound relevance. With little more than grassroots organizing, she mobilized thousands to restore not only landscapes, but hope itself. Her Nobel Peace Prize brought fleeting global attention, but her greatest success remains local. Millions of trees now stand as living monuments to her vision. Among the Pashtun tribes, known to the world as fierce warriors, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, also called the Frontier Gandhi, preached nonviolence. His vision was as paradoxical as it was revolutionary: an army without weapons, sworn not to fight but to serve. He called them the Kudai Kidmatgar, the servants of God. In a society where honor was bound to martial valor, Khan offered a different form of honor: courage through peace. The socioeconomic landscape of the Northwest Frontier Province was one of poverty, tribal loyalty, and British colonial manipulation. Khan's resources were meager, his following ridiculed at first. Yet thousands took up his call, wearing red uniforms and standing in disciplined rows, not with rifles but with resolve. His story remains overshadowed by the figures of Gandhi and Jinnah, but it offers one of history's most compelling examples of peace wrestled from a culture steeped in conflict. If Ghaffar Khan redefined courage, Muhammad Yunus redefined economics. In Bangladesh, one of the poorest nations in the world, Yunus saw that poverty was not caused by laziness, but by lack of opportunity. Traditional banks deemed the poor unworthy of credit. Yunus overturned that logic by inventing microfinance, tiny loans, often just a few dollars, given mostly to women, to start small businesses and build self-sufficiency. The constraints were immense: rural poverty, gender inequality, political instability. Yet, Yunus's Grameen Bank gave millions a path out of destitution. His vision reframed economics as a tool for peace. Where poverty breeds violence and despair, access to capital fosters stability and dignity. Though he received a Nobel Peace Prize, Yunus remains better known in development circles than in popular culture. His story, a quiet revolution that reshaped lives far from global headlines. The world remembers Nelson Mandela, but beneath his towering presence were thousands of unnamed mediators, church leaders, and community organizers who kept peace alive in the townships of South Africa. During apartheid, violence could have escalated into civil war. It was in dusty halls, church basements, and crowded community meetings that small-scale conflicts were diffused. Strikes were calmed, riots softened, negotiations sustained. These local mediators had few resources but immense courage. They endured threats, police harassment, and the grinding pressure of poverty, yet they preserved fragile trust. Their efforts allowed the larger reconciliation led by Mandela to take root. Though history does not record their names, their legacy is written in the relative stability that followed apartheid's end. Regional visionaries remind us that peace is not always about treaties signed in capitals or speeches delivered before millions. Sometimes it is the planting of a tree, the closing of a barracks, the granting of a loan, or the calming of a riot. Their successes were quiet but profound, their visions localized yet enduring. If the global visionaries inspire us with their tragic grandeur, the regional visionaries humble us with their patient triumphs. When we step back from the individual stories of visionaries, we begin to see patterns, threads of similarity woven through lives separated by centuries and continents. Their stories invite us to reflect on recurring themes: misunderstanding and martyrdom, resources and scarcity, the different languages of peace, and the quiet endurance of legacies. These themes give us not only insight into their lives, but into the way humanity itself grapples with hope. Visionaries have always been misunderstood. Jesus was condemned as a blasphemer, Gandhi dismissed as naive, King branded a radical, Rabin derided as a traitor. Even those who succeeded quietly, like Maathai or Yunus, faced ridicule, resistance, or obscurity in their lifetimes. Why? Because visionaries see beyond their moment. Their words and actions appear disruptive precisely because they refuse to accept the assumptions of their age. To their contemporaries, they look like dreamers or troublemakers. To history, they look like prophets. Martyrdom often seals their stories, whether literal, as with Jesus, Joan, King, Malcolm, Rabin, Lennon, or figurative, as with the marginalization of Khan or the anonymity of countless South African mediators. The tragedy is not just their deaths, but the blindness of societies that only recognize vision when it is too late. A striking contrast emerges when we compare global figures with regional ones, the scale of their resources. Jesus had nothing but parables. Joan had only her faith. Gandhi wielded symbols like salt and homespun cloth. By contrast, Yunus created an actual bank, and Rabin negotiated from the seat of government. Yet in both cases, the outcome depended not on material power, but on imagination. Scarcity often sharpened the vision. When resources are absent, metaphors and symbols become weapons. Jesus' kingdom of heaven, Gandhi's spinning wheel, King's dream, Lennon's imagine, all are acts of imagination more enduring than armies or treasuries. The lesson is that peace does not need abundance. It needs vision capable of reframing scarcity into hope. Not all visions of peace speak the same language. Gandhi's nonviolence was active resistance, King's was moral appeal, Malcolm's was dignity through self-determination, Rabin's was pragmatic diplomacy. Maathai spoke through trees, Yunus through loans, Khan through disciplined nonviolence. Lennon sang his vision, Joan embodied hers in armor. The multiplicity of messages shows that peace is not monolithic. It adapts to cultures, resources, and circumstances. But the heartbeat remains the same: dignity, reconciliation, and hope. Comparing King and Lennon, we see sermons and songs as parallel scriptures. Gandhi and Yunus both wielded the smallest tools, salt grains and coins, against vast systems. Joan's sword and Maathai's sapling symbolize the different weapons of courage. These juxtapositions reveal the adaptability of peace as an idea, expressed in whatever form resonates with people's daily lives. Who became saints? Who became whispers? Jesus was deified, Joan canonized, King honored with monuments. But others remained obscure. Khan, Figueres, the township mediators. The difference lies not in the worth of their visions, but in the mechanisms of memory. Religious institutions, national governments, and popular culture all play roles in amplifying or silencing legacies. Yet even the quietest voices echo in unexpected ways. Costa Rica's schools, Kenya's forests, Bangladesh's microloans, South Africa's fragile peace all stand as living memorials to regional visionaries. What do these stories mean for us today? They remind us that peace is fragile, contested, and easily forgotten. They also remind us that it is possible. In a world overwhelmed by violence, inequality, and environmental collapse, the examples of visionaries give us tools for renewal. They invite us to imagine new forms of activism, planting trees as protest, offering loans as liberation, telling stories as subversion. Their lives teach us that leadership is service, that greatness is humility, that peace is not absence of conflict, but presence of justice. The greatest mistake we make with visionaries is to look only at what might have been, rather than at what was already achieved. Their lives, whether world-famous or regionally bound, prove that peace can be planted, nurtured, and grown by ordinary hands. The challenge for us is not merely to mourn what might have been, but to continue what has already begun. Visionaries showed us the path. It is left to us to walk it further. In the end, perhaps the most profound tragedy is not their deaths, but when we forget to carry their visions forward. Their stories, both famous and overlooked, remind us that the embrace of peace was never meant to be a dream. It was meant to be lived, nourished, and handed down, one generation at a time. Linger here a moment. We are living on a hinge of history, where the familiar is giving way to something new, stranger, and more dangerous, though not fated to be worse. The tools in our hands can deepen mercy as easily as they can magnify harm. What matters is not whether change comes, but what kind of people we choose to be as it arrives. We may be the last generation that calls itself fully human before we braid our lives to our machines. Will those who follow remember this civilization as humble, generous, and kind, or as clever, brutish, unforgiving, and unjust? The answer is being written in the small choices we make today: a truth spoken, a hand extended, a duty kept, a restraint practiced. Let us act as ancestors, not merely predecessors, so that tomorrow can say of us, they shaped the future with courage and care.